Okay, we're sitting here at the Newmarket Old Town Hall with the Deputy Mayor, John Taylor. And we just happened to find out that he thinks that his grandfather was a home child. So we're doing research right at this very moment
That's right.
to ensure that he does have the proper information. I think that we're pretty close. So what made you think that your grandfather was a home child?
Actually, when this display was put on and put up, my father said, "Oh, well, your grandfather was a homeboy." And I said, "Oh, well, I didn't know that." And I said, and actually my response was, "How did I not know that?"
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really actually a story I've just heard recently.
Okay.
But he, I assume, and I haven't asked him, but I assume he just heard it from his father.
So did you ask him what that meant?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so he started telling me that his father, when he was in his teens, his parents had both died by that point. I don't know how, but I'm sure I'll ask now. But they both had died at that point, and the war had just ended. And I think he had he had many. That's right. I do know that. 14 children, 14 siblings. My grandfather had.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many boys, 6 or 7 or 8 boys, but 4 or 5 of the boys were killed in the war. He was the second youngest, and as far as I know, he came over in his teens as a homeboy to a farm in Orangeville.
Okay, so close to here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the story as you know it up to this point.
Well, I know a couple other things, which
Okay.
is that he spent essentially one farming season on this farm, worked all spring and summer, and as winter set in, the farmer, who was probably on a tight budget, and I assume said, "I'm not feeding you all winter. You're out."
Oh.
And my grandfather made his way to Toronto with, I think there was another maybe boy on that farm or a neighboring farm. They made their way to Toronto. I met 2 other young British guys, and they rented one room together and stayed in one room for a year or 2, I'm not sure, but not terribly long. And the only other thing I was told is that they supported each other. And so when one got a job, he would help the others until the other one got a job, and if that one lost, and sort of helped each other get going, and away they went in life. Yeah.
So what part of Toronto was that, do you know?
I don't know. No.
Okay.
No.
So there's lots of mysteries that
Yeah.
you need cleared up.
I believe they were. My grandfather met my grandmother in Toronto. She's from Ireland and England. Her name was Mary Ratcliffe, Ratcliffe. His name was John William Taylor. Her name was Mary Ratcliffe. My name is John William Ratcliffe Taylor.
So you're named after both of them?
Yes, his full name with her maiden name as well in there. And,
Okay.
And they after marrying moved up to, I believe, Keswick, Newmarket area, and first Keswick and then Newmarket.
And you said something about your grandparents having the first store?
They had, I believe, one of, if not the first store not on Main Street. So it's nearby, and it was called Taylor's Grosseteria.
Okay.
It's near the Legion or Prince Charles School. There's a whole connection out there. My grandfather bought a chunk of, if not all of, the army camp when it closed down, or years after it closed down. And my grandfather and my uncle and my dad renovated one of the buildings into their home. And the building they renovated into their home was the latrine.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's another story I know of. Yeah, so
Okay.
the latrine that was on those grounds was their home at one point.
Interesting.
And then my grandfather worked at the office specialty, and my father, the office specialty was emitting a lot of pollution, and my father thought something should be done about that, and so he ran for town council in 1963. If he was terribly successful, maybe he would have ended my grandfather's career at the office specialty, but I think it managed to both work out. And then, yeah, my father was in more or less, a couple times out, but from 1963 up until 2013, he was on town council and then mayor for the last 10 years.
And now you are carrying on the family tradition.
To a certain degree, I guess, yeah.
Do you ever meet your grandfather?
Oh,
Do you
heavens,
remember?
yeah, oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, so my grandparents, for the last many years of their lives, lived in our house. We lived out on Yonge Street, where the Canadian Tire is now, in a big old farmhouse, and there was a full apartment attached to it, and they lived in that apartment with just one door between us, so that everybody's back and forth constantly, and so, yeah, no, we spent a lot of time together.
but he never talked about about his past to you.
You know, he might have. I don't recall
Okay.
it. I mean, if he
Yeah.
did, he didn't do it when I was older. I would have remembered.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think he did, that I'm aware of.
Because we find that a lot of people didn't talk about it because there was a stigma attached to being a home child. And so, you know.
Yeah, that makes
they kept
sense.
it-
Because I knew nothing about it until basically a week ago. And
Okay.
my older sister, we were sitting today with my parents, and I brought it up, and I said, Leah, wait to hear this. I said, unless you know this. And she said, I've never heard this either. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and
So without this exhibit, this might have, my sister and myself might not have known this. It might have never come up. So it's a good thing. We've got this bit of family history back, and
yeah, it's really quite a fascinating Canadian story when you think
is.
about 100,000 or over 100,000 children being sent to Canada, and then their legacy, which is you and me.
yeah, and the other thing I can't help to think about, because of some of the things that are going currently, but you listen to the stories of, the story we just heard of somebody that, coming here as a homeboy and then getting upgraded education and then becoming a principal of a school, and my grandfather settling here and then his son becoming mayor. And then you think about Syrian refugees that are coming to Canada right now and what they're going to contribute to this country
That's right.
over the next decades, right?
That's right. It's, yeah, there are similarities, and I think that we always have to remember Canada is a country of immigrants.
That's right.
These are a special group, though, because
Absolutely.
for the most part, they didn't have the choice.
Right.
Or if they were given the choice, they didn't really know what it
What
was.
it meant.
As we heard in Pat's
Yes.
interview, he didn't know anything about Canada, but he thought it would be a good adventure.
But he signed up, yeah.
And so he
Yeah.
came over.
Yeah.
We're going to see if we have any results
Okay.
now, and so we'll stop for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so the information that we've been able to find out is not completely definitive yet, but we will continue to dig deeper. But let's hear about what you learned today.
Right. So we just discovered that that certainly some of what I've been told is verified from some of the research that's being done as we speak, and that the main piece that certainly sets the logical circumstances that would support someone being a homeboy, which is that in 1911, so my grandfather was born in 1905, so when he was 6 years old, that he had he was one of 13 siblings. So one had died at that point. But when he's at the age of 6 now, 1911, his mother has passed away, and his father would be raising children on his own and raising, 12 of them. And my grandfather being 6, and I believe at least one younger than that even. So, you're talking about circumstances where almost nobody could manage.
It certainly sounds like that.
And so it would certainly seem logical,
Yeah.
and from what I've been told, that he came over as a homeboy in his teens, and so they probably managed on from there for some time, trying to. But as I said, we also know from our end is that his father had also passed away by the time he came. So he's 6 years old, and his mother has passed away. Sometime in the next less than 10 years, probably, his
Yeah.
father also passes away.
Yeah,
And then he loses multiple siblings in the war.
right.
And the other thing we found out there from the research is that my grandfather, as I said, is John William Taylor, and my grandmother was Ellen Mary Ratcliffe, and my name is John William Ratcliffe Taylor. But my grandfather's father was Thomas Taylor, and my father is Thomas Taylor, and so I'm assuming and I hadn't known that before, but obviously that's where he got his name, was from his grandfather or his
Yeah.
father's father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, names seem to be passed down quite frequently, in the earlier days.
Yeah.
It certainly is interesting, and it's going to be interesting to find out the next step. But it does sound logically like he would have needed help and especially with that many children on his own.
And then he passed away, of
And
course,
then he
himself.
passed away himself.
But certainly, one thing this does is it raises your curiosity a lot. I've got a lot of questions for my father
Yes.
when I see him next.
Yes.
So.
And just one other thing, it was, I think you said Hull, in Hull, England, right?
Yes, that's the area in England he was from, according to my parents, from Hull, England. So I
Okay.
called them too on a break and asked them that. So that, and then, finding out that my father's grandfather was Thomas Taylor. He's Thomas Taylor. I know my father's middle name is Paul Thomas. So now I'm wondering why Paul. So maybe
Who's
there's another
Paul?
connection, and who's Paul? Where that would come from? Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll keep digging.
Okay, we will.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for
Thank
your time.
you. Thanks.